Hello and welcome to the WIHS Journal, Public Affairs from 104.9 FM. I'm Paul Kretschmer. My guest on today's broadcast is African-American Dr. Marilyn Singleton, who comments most often on medical issues but takes up social issues from time to time. The title of her thesis we're discovering this time is Not All Black Lives Matter.
I think we've had an absolute indication of that after what has happened this past weekend of July 4th. My goodness. Children killed, people being killed in the streets by other black people, whether they be protesters or not. Yet we don't hear a word about it. There's a brief notice of it on some news stations, but many news stations don't even mention it at all. It's as though they don't want to have to admit that there's another problem, that it's not just white people hating on black people, that there's a problem overall in the black community. There's a problem overall in society, not being able to speak with one another, not being able to truthfully discuss our issues.
It seems like at the moment that if you talk to anyone from any ethnicity at the current time, many ethnicity representatives have beefs with a lot of other people. It seems like the longer the current state of affairs goes, the more things fly apart, to the degree that the diversity becomes a handicap to communication rather than enriching an overall society experience for everyone who lives in America.
You nailed it. One of the things that bothers me so much is if you approach some sort of what's supposed to be a conversation and approach it as, well, you're a terrible person. How can I make you stop being a terrible person? Why would you talk to me if I approached you that way? That we can't even say, hey, let's talk. Let me know how you really feel. And we all know how hard that is, even with our partners and children, to get people to say how they really feel. But they're certainly never going to tell you that if you start off railing against them. And what bothers me about what's going on is that's the drumbeat. White people are hideous. You're hideous. You're hideous. Well, why would anybody who never thought one way or the other about black people, Mexicans, whatever minority group you want to say, they were just going around living their life, enjoying their family, and never really thought about it, never treated anybody poorly, and suddenly they're told that they're the worst thing on earth. This is not good. This is going to make ill will where there was none previously.
I'll give you an example of my own background. I grew up in a small town in eastern Iowa, about 3,000 population. It had a small private liberal arts college on the hill that the town kind of drops down from top to bottom. Most of the people who lived there were Caucasian for the most part, and there was a significant subset of people who had come over from Europe in advance of the Holocaust who were Jewish. But it never occurred to me when I left that cloistered existence to look down on other people or to think there was something wrong with someone if they didn't look exactly like I did. Now, was I merely innocent, or was I ignorant of the challenges that maybe the wider world might present to me than I might have experienced for myself in the place where I grew up?
There's probably a little bit of both. Certainly, if you grow up in a universe that you don't confront these things, yeah, you're going to feel different than somebody who did. But on the other hand, you can go out there with that nice, fresh outlook, and that outlook doesn't need to be tainted by people, again, telling you that something's wrong with you because what your so-called ancestors may or may not have done, or just the mere fact that you're an American makes you an awful person. And this sounds so simplistic, but all I can think of when I hear people tearing down America is, why are people trying so hard to get here? Why are Africans coming here, black Africans, who come here and they try to make a life for themselves? If this was so awful here, they wouldn't even bother to come. Yes, we have things we have to do to improve life for everyone and have us all live harmoniously, which is sort of a utopian ideal. Obviously, everybody's not always going to get along with everybody else. And there's always going to be jerks. And there's going to be jerks who exhibit their jerkedness by being racist, and some exhibit it in other ways. Some people yell at the people who work at Trader Joe's just to be mean. So there's all sorts of awful people out there, and we'll never erase that. That's just being human. But what we can try to do is not vilify others before we even know them. And I live in a pretty diverse community, and I look out the window and see guys 17, 18, 19 years old of all different races kind of marching off to the park to just go have a good time. And they aren't sitting around hating on each other. So let's not try to foment hate where there really isn't any.
Middletown, Connecticut, where I'm at, is the home of Wesleyan University, one of the so-called little Ivy schools. And so the population is reasonably diverse in a town of about between 40 and 45,000 people. And yet we've had demonstrations here, peaceful ones down Main Street. But at the same time, we've also had members of the Italian American Club in Middletown, because many people came from Sicily in the last 100 years and immigrated here and settled here, who had a statue of Christopher Columbus in the park alongside the Connecticut River, which is the largest river in New England. And they felt compelled to remove that statue because so many of them had been attacked in other cities. It seems like it's almost like a knee-jerk reaction. We feel this way, so therefore that's what we do about it.
Oh, and it's terrible, and I really look at it, it's now become cult-like behavior, and people don't even look at history. Look at what those Congress people did, where they put on a kente cloth and kneeled. Do they even know where a kente cloth came from? Likely not. Yeah. Do they even know that the slave trade went through West Africa, whether the Ghanan people were the ringleaders of being slave traders or not? It went through their country. So you're wearing a scarf that represents a group that was a participant in the slave trade. Read your history. And what's really sad is now that they're going around so-called canceling people, let's make a list of people who have not been stellar, yet they've done something else wonderful in their life. We would have no one in our history books left. We really would be in an Orwellian, dystopian society where you erase everything, and this is a bothersome trend.
That's a point that's been made by the staff at the historic Mount Vernon home in Virginia that was the home of George Washington. A statement that was issued, I don't have it in front of me, but the gist of it reads something like this. Yes, we understand and know that he owned slaves, that the economy of his plantation operated on the basis of slaves. Part 2 of this series with Dr. Marilyn Singleton will continue with the illustration from the life of George Washington. For further information, call us at 860-346-1049, 860-346-1049. The opinions expressed are those of the participants, not necessarily those of the staff or management of the station. I'm Paul Kretschmer on the WIHS Journal, Public Affairs from WIHS, Middletown.